Sometimes we forget that career changes and career transitions are also part of the employee journey and the employee experience. But are we ready for them? Do we have the right mindset, the right moves and tactics in place to get to that next role, that next movement, that promotion? I don't know. That's why I ask smart people to be on the podcast for us. This episode is no different. Hold on. And this is Relationships at Work, the Employee Experience and Workplace Culture podcast. I'm Russel. I'm in a weird headspace these days. I just had the luxury of taking an extended time away from work. I know a lot of people, a lot of you don't get that luxury, but I thankfully do in the role that I occupy, and it allowed me to sort of pull away from work. And honestly, it was full of nothing. There was a lot of just sitting and being still and not really digging into too many projects, or at least I tried not to. It was funny, that first week I had such ambition. I was like, oh, I'm going to get all the things done. Had a list, had 2 pages of lists. But right out of the gate, I was like, no, I do need a vacation. And as I sat with this time and this moment to reflect, I realized that we don't honestly get this amount of time very often. Some people get 2-week vacations, but because they travel, there's so much stress in the leaving and the coming back. And even if you take 2 weeks, which is a lot of time, some people don't even get that much. It's amazing how just as we're turning that corner and just as we're feeling relaxed, we then have to go back to work. So we don't even get to enjoy what relaxed looks and feels like. If there's anything I've taken away from having a bit of a longer time, it's breathing. Oh my God. Breathing has been a godsend. And let me explain this to you. I get triggered by certain things and certain people. So by having this time and feeling that residual stress from those triggers, anytime I had thoughts, I just had some really deep breaths. Doesn't work for everybody, I get it, but it certainly worked for me, of just grounding myself in a moment. And it was I can't wait to bring this back into work, because I think it's going to help a lot. Also, meditation has been really, really helpful, and movement has been essential, whether it's picking up and putting down heavy things, or just getting outside and going for a walk. Just a walk, a couple of kilometers for those Americans listening. But yeah, it's been really eye-opening of the time that we need to take away from that work, away from those moments of stress and overwhelm and burnout, and that I don't think we ever get enough time to just reassess, rethink. I know a lot of people are doing that right now, especially after COVID, when everybody was suddenly on pause, and now we're scrambling to get back to what normality looks like. I have to say, this little extended vacation has been probably the smartest thing I have ever done in my professional career. I didn't do a thing, but I also did a lot. Yeah, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or you want to chat a little bit more, always feel free to pick up the email and email me at yourrelationshipsatwork@gmail.com. I do love engaging with you and having a chat here and there. Another chat I really, really enjoyed. Really, oh man, my segues, they're just on point today. I talked to an amazing woman who dropped some great knowledge about career transitions. We think about careers as I start a job, I'm in a job, I leave a job. But those moments in between those jobs, as you're building your career, as you're moving up a ladder or across monkey bars or wherever your career progresses, that's some meat in there too. That is really valuable strategy, mindset, thinking, tactics, process to get you in the right position to move in the right direction. Maureen McCann is an internationally renowned and recognized expert in this field, and I'm pretty stoked to have her on so she can talk to us. Let's get to talking then. And on the show, that's Maureen McCann, and here is why she's awesome. She's the executive career strategist and owner of Promotion Career Solutions. 11 times. I'm not going to go through it all of it, but 11 times Canadian Certified Career and Job Search Strategist. She's a 15 times award-winning executive resume writer, an instructor, and senior board member at Career Professionals of Canada as part of the Career Development Certificate program. She's a published career researcher, lots of book things, lots of award things, lots of media coverage things, and now relationships at work guest to add to her portfolio. Hello, Maureen.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Look at me.
I like a little jazzed up to start the show because it gets rolling into the first question that sometimes is not always the easiest. So I do a little, hype man preparation before we get into Maureen. What is the worst or best employee experience you've ever had?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you the story of the best, but it happened because of the worst. So I left the worst. I was working in a nonprofit organization, and I was volunteering in career development in between gigs. And to make a long story really short, a woman called me up and said, "Would you be interested in working here? I got your name from the woman that you're volunteering with." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. How did you find me?" And it was so interesting because the reason that she heard about me was because she had hired someone from that role, and now there was a vacancy, and this is how it all shook out. And so that was really great. And when I came to the person I was volunteering with, she said, "Oh my gosh, are you going to be working with so-and-so?" And I was like, "Yeah." They were like, "He is the great," his name is Wayne Pagani. I'm going to throw a plug out there. He is the greatest person in this industry right now. He's always talking to people. He's connecting people and resources. And so I had a really great mentor. So I got to know the team, Betty Woodman, Paul Roach, Wayne Pagani, and it was just a phenomenal team who really cared about each other, really connected, really wanted to do great work for the participants in our employment program. And I know it's so cheesy to say it sounded like they were like family, but we are very close still to this day.
When I asked that question, and the answers have been wide and back and forth, whether the good and the bad, it's always interesting because a lot of people will mention an organization or just say shall not be named because of anger. But what people don't realize, or trauma a lot of the time, what people don't realize is that it's such a personal thing. So I love that you're name dropping because I know a lot of people sort of cringe at that idea, but it is a personal thing. It's not the organization that made it great. It's the people that made it great and specific people that made it great. So I love the fact that you're going, no, I'm going to drop their names. I'm going to make an effort to really showcase that person.
Yeah, and I think too, had the organization not been supportive, I mean, it's got to be both because they could be really great people and work for a leader or an organization that just, didn't mesh with where they were at. And so, yeah, I agree. Work is personal.
And it's true. It could be within a horrible, shitty organization that you have a bubble of love. And that does happen a lot of the times because I've had people ask questions about what it's like to work for X organization or X organization. You're like, it depends on who your boss is. It depends on what level of the building you work in. It depends on so many factors. So it is so personal, but you're right. It also has to kind of be nurtured within a culture that gets it. Yeah. And that's actually going to be a part of what we're talking about today because we're talking about career transitions. I love this idea because the podcast is about relationships at work and the employee culture experience, but the employee journey has so many twists and turns to it. And a lot of people think beginning, middle, end. Not necessarily that those beginnings, those middles, and those ends could shift as part of the greater journey. So maybe it's best if we just first define what a transition is, because I'm also trying not to say career change. Are they not the exact same thing? Am I just not thesaurus exercising here?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's really personal because it could be a pivot, it could be a transition. Like when I think of transition, I think of it's going to be big. But there could be small little transitions, internal changes, like personal internal, not just the company internal, but your changes for what your priorities are. Like think about, when your life shifts a little bit, then the way you look at work or your relationship with work shifts a little bit as well. Your priorities change, your values shift a little bit. And so, yeah, I think anytime there's a shift, a change, a pivot, whatever you want to name it, that could be construed as a career transition. But it's all part of career development and career management.
What do you think is the right time for someone to consider or pull the trigger on making that decision? Is it just any life change? What's the writing on the wall that you're like, okay, might now be the time to reconsider?
I think if you're doing any research on anything that has to do with your career, you are already there. You're already deciding, okay, something's going on. Even when you just land in a new role, you might think, okay, this is really great, but I want to get to the next thing. And so career development, it's always happening. It's fluid. It's not this one time and then you do this other time. I mean, yes, we do tend to think, oh, it's when I change jobs, but it's really like anything that's happening throughout your career. There's this really great book that talks about squiggly careers. Like there's no straight line anymore. Like you're going to go all over the place. You're going to get things that are right, things that aren't right. So I think of an example where, you could get the company right, you could get the work that you're doing right, but the leader is not for you. And so you got those two things right. You might be thinking, okay, I want to do the same work, but I want to do it for a different organization because I don't gel with this leader.
I also was talking to a friend of mine recently who has always loved his job, always loved the people he works with, but he now has a newborn. And the world has shifted for him and his spouse to the point where they may even take a step back for how much money they make or the amount of stress that is being heaped on them because their priorities have shifted more so than they even realize. So, yeah, I mean, it can be a life thing. It can also be exactly that, a shitty boss.
Yeah.
Lots of factors.
Yeah, so I'm a military spouse. A lot of people don't know that about me. So we move around every couple of years, and so that's a lot of change, almost chaos. And so I had to choose a career that was somewhat flexible and adaptable. Do I love every aspect of it? I mean, I do. But you could see where there's some challenges for me that I maybe don't embrace as much when we moved our teenagers as when we moved our young children who were sort of preschool age. And so, yeah, as your life changes, your career will adapt because like your friend's example, your priorities, your values shift a little bit. And so, of course, it only makes sense that you'll be thinking differently about your relationship with work.
Are there different ways of looking at this based on where you are in your career or perhaps generational? Like when you're just starting versus I'm mid-career versus I'm leaving, or an executive versus middle management. Is it all the same steps from beginning to end when it comes to a transition or change or pivot? Or is it, maybe you should hold off a couple of years, or maybe give an executive 2 years tops and then move on? Is there anything about that to that?
You know what? Everyone's different. And there's lots of generic advice that you can offer, but really it comes down to, do you know yourself well enough to know what your priorities are right now? And if you do, great. And sometimes your priority is, I need to stay put. I need stability. And so while the baby's young or while I'm going to school or whatever, I'm just going to put up with X, Y, and Z. And then once that piece is over and I have a little bit more stability, then I can make a shift. We all make these, decisions for ourselves. And there's so many different factors or variables about what constitutes our relationship with work, right? So there's pay, there's benefits, there's time off, there's relationships with leaders, relationships with your colleagues, the actual work that you're doing, how valued you feel at work. But I think too, sometimes as a general rule, people like to focus on the money, right? And so when we're starting off, there's this myth that in order for you to be okay, you need to earn a certain amount of money, right? And so my parents anyway, they really encouraged me to find a stable career so that they would feel okay, that they felt like I was doing okay so they didn't have to worry. That's fear-based, and many of us are living that, and that's fine. We'll go through that phase. Hopefully, at some point, we'll get to the point where, and again, this is sort of Maslow's hierarchy, where it's like you need to feel safe and secure, and then you can move up, to basically, self-awareness and self-improvement. But we're all at different stages of that. And the thing that I'll say here, and then I'll end on this is, and we can go back and forth. Like we don't go straight up. Sometimes we go up, sometimes we go down. There's so many variables at play. It's hard to say, here's a general rule of thumb.
And even in boomerang employees, which is a term that's becoming more and more common, where people will leave organizations and then return to them because either in a new role or the same role, just because it wasn't a fit at the time, the stars did not align, but years needed to pass, skills needed to be made for them to return. So there is no cookie cutter. I appreciate you saying that. But have you ever encountered where it's a bad idea to be doing career transitions and people are like, no, now is the time that I need to pivot. I need to do something different. Is there a wrong way to do it?
No, but I will say this, because I'm going to support everybody where they're at. Like if they feel like they need to go, then they need to go. But here's what I'll say. Have you exhausted every opportunity where you are before you start looking elsewhere? Because sometimes the grass is not greener, and you really need to do your research in terms of labor market, your information. Is it true that the grass is greener, or is it just your perception? And so what I will caution people with is don't run away from a job, run to a job. So be excited about going to a place as opposed to, this is the worst job ever. I gotta get out of here as fast as possible. Now that's not to say that people aren't in that position and they do feel this sense of urgency to have to get out. But again, I'll caution them. Let's make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Take all the things you love about what you're doing and make sure you incorporate those. And the thing that's driving you crazy where you are, we got to figure out a way to make sure that when you're interviewing and you're getting to know that company, you don't do it. Doesn't wind up the exact same. So trading a bad leader for a bad leader or a bad fit for a bad fit. Yeah.
We're talking at a really interesting time here where new buzzy phrase words like quiet quitting and great resignation are getting thrown around like crazy, like they're suddenly new things other than just have suddenly better PR departments that can give them new names.
Yeah.
However, I'm just kind of curious, in your world, if there is some influence coming from younger generations that are not necessarily sticking around jobs just because they have a good pension. And they're like, you know what? No, peace out. I'm done. I don't want to do this for longer than a year, and leaving. Meanwhile, your Gen X is going, you can do that?
Yeah,
you can do that.
Yeah.
So how is it happening in your world that you're seeing this? Has there been a shift?
I think it's the permission to talk about it. I think for the first time we are talking about, and quiet quitting to me is basically employee experience, employee engagement, right? And so people are like, yeah, I'm not putting up with that. Why would I work for $15 an hour and be killing myself and burn myself out and have nothing left for my family? I watched my parents do that. I'm not going to do that. And so I think bravely we now have people in our workforce who are starting those conversations and basically showing us Gen X, yeah, you can do this. And we're gobsmacked. Oh, okay. And again, it's not like we didn't know, but maybe we needed to see other people be successful with it in order for it to be okay. Because I was raised by boomers, and that was not the way that I was raised. Like, you get a job, you stay with the job, and you do what you said you were going to do.
You live here, you die here. This is the the years and decades you put in because of X, or that's the way it's always been done before. So thank you, Gen Zers, for mixing things up a little bit more for us. Us Gen Xers really actually do approve it and appreciate it.
This message is approved by Gen X.
Yes, me and Maureen have talked. We're speaking for the entire generation. We'll see you at the next meeting. Yeah. So what does a typical career transition look like? I know we've already established there's no typical. I know it personalizes, but there is that moment from, hey, I'm just going to Google, to something's changed. So what generally happens from beginning to end?
Generally speaking, people want to have a good understanding of what they want. Like, what does success look like? And so then they can go out to the labor market and figure out how they fit in the labor market. What tends to happen is people do the reverse. They go out to the job boards, They realize they don't fit any of the things that are out there. They panic, and then they take it personal. And it's not personal at all. It's just information. It's just data points. And so generally speaking, when you work with me, step one, are you clear about what it is that you're looking for? Like, what does success look like? Let's be very clear about that. And the most common response I get to that is, well, I'm open to everything. And while that is wonderful, great, what happens is you can't give everything your full attention. So when you specialize, then you're able to articulate a much clearer message to the niche audience that you want to talk with, right? This is branding. And so if you're like, oh, I'm a gamer and I'm an accountant and I'm a bookkeeper and I do like financial literacy training on the side, some of those things are not like the others, right? And so it's really important to make your message very clear for people so that they can understand what you're capable of doing. So that's, I think, step two is have that really clear message defined for your audience, because you can't be all things to all people all the time, right? And from there, it's a matter of putting together basically a plan, much like a business plan. Okay, if I'm going to be looking for work, here are all the criteria that and again, this is custom, this is personalized, I need to do. I need to talk to Betty, and I need to talk to Mohammed, and I need to talk to Sal about, what they're doing, because they're in companies that I'm targeting. And again, this is the labor market information. So you're getting a sense here of, again, and this is the founding father of career guidance. Number one, what is it that makes you tick? What is it that's most important to you? Number two, what is going on in the market? And then number three, how do you pair those two things together, the market and yourself, and develop an offering? And that's really where those are the steps that people go through generally, again, very generally and vaguely, when it comes to career transition.
I had a conversation with a mentor of mine, and he gave me some amazing advice, which was figure out what problems you fix. Because, and this totally, piles on to what you said, is initially we were all talking about we wanted generalists. I can do everything for anybody, just put me and let me go. But that's hard to sell. And that's really what you're doing with this, is selling yourself. And you want some executive somewhere to go, ooh, I have a problem. Who fixes this problem? Who's the kind of person that would do this kind of thing? And so it's an interesting exercise even for yourself to understand, oh, I don't do this. Oh, actually, I do this. Oh, it is only 3 or 4 bullets, not 170 bullets, which makes a lot of sense. And the other piece was figure out what your perfect day looks like. And what jazzes you, what excites you, what kind of day. I mean, most people will be like, wake up, don't go to work. That's my perfect day. Like, well, sure. Doesn't pay the bills, but sounds fantastic. So I like the idea of just making it about yourself, because you're the one you have to live with and work with, and make that perfect fit. But not everybody has those things lined up. So as someone who's, say, looking for a transition, what would you recommend that they sort of have in place? Because you kind of mentioned branding, but not everybody just goes, okay, now I'm started. What's my brand? Like, there's some things they need to have in place before they move forward. What would you recommend they do that with any pivot?
So your mission, right? Your I believe statement, or your like, this is the problem that I solve. First and foremost, priority number one. And then do the research around what are the people that you're targeting? What's the problem that they need solved? And define what you do and what you don't do. So for example, they might require people to do 10 different skills. You see it on a job poster. We need these 10 different skills. You might be like the most amazing person at 6 of those skills, but the other 4 just drive you absolute, like you're not a fan. You'll do them, but it's just not your cup of tea. It's not in your perfect day scenario. Focus on the 6, sell the 6, make sure that's what you're pitching. And because this is an interesting part of job search. Nobody likes it. Nobody really, I like it. I think it's amazing, but it's hard to do because you're not jazzed about it. You're not excited about it. So if you align yourself, if you know, hey, this is the stuff, this is the work I want to do. These are the types of organizations. You've done all those pieces. I'm not saying magically like, oh, it's so much fun now, but it's way easier to get yourself motivated than, oh my God, I have to apply to the job boards again and like these face lists and I don't get any responses and this is horrible on my self-esteem, like all of those pieces. So I think, yeah, definitely again, knowing with clarity. And then we get into some of the tactical places, right? So assuming you have a strategy, we get into things like resumes, LinkedIn profiles, again, having a job search plan, doing information interviews with different organizations to learn, is this really the organization that I think they are? Are they really doing cool projects, or is this all like media hype? You're really just trying to get to the place where you feel like I'm making the right decision, I'm heading in the right direction for me, for what I need.
I want to deep dive into a few things you've touched on and just a little deeper, branding being one of them. First, and I see that as a branding, not only branding yourself within the organization you're already in, but also online, because as you've mentioned, LinkedIn is now a powerhouse for a lot of recruiters and for those looking for work. I mean, you can even put a little frame around your face saying, I'm hiring or open to work. I mean, that's pretty huge. So from a branding perspective, a lot of people aren't or immediately think like an organization, not themselves individually. What are some things people can do both internally and externally to help with this process?
Know what it is that you're offering to an organization. Like, what's the value? What's the thing that I think of Jim Collins here, and I know we talked about him yesterday, but he talks about the hedgehog concept, which is basically like, what is the thing that you do best? And who's willing to pay for that? Like, how do we make a business out of that? But it's also something that you love and you want to make money doing because maybe it doesn't feel like work. I think you have to start from a branding perspective. I think you have to start with, what are the things that I know I do really, really well? And this is really tough for people because I just do whatever they tell me, or I do whatever's in my job description, or I do it all. And so I'll encourage you to take a step back and really think on, your perfect day scenario, or your like, when does the time fly by? Like, what am I doing when time flies by? These are things that we don't really deep dive for ourselves. And I think some introspection is needed. Whereas we generally try to just we just get on the escalator and just keep going. Like, they send us more projects, we do more projects. And so, take a deep breath, sit back and figure out, what is it that you have to offer that's of value to the world of work, and start there. Then, it's a matter of putting that message together. But I will say this, you have to believe it. If you don't believe that you're good at whatever it is, you are going to have a really hard time convincing anybody else.
A trick I've heard a few people do to sort of convince themselves is write a list of things you do and have accomplished in your organization. What are your wins over a period of time? How is the organization better because you were there? Might help shape that brand a little bit better for them, just tangibly.
And ask your colleagues and your friends. I mean, go take a look at thank you emails that you've gotten or work relationships that you have. Think about, again, the things that you got really excited about. When people describe you, what words are they using? I mean, you can do all kinds of exercises. I do one where I encourage people to do 5 I am statements. I am helpful. I am courageous. I have statements. I have this many years of experience. I have, this credential or this qualifications. I love, or I'm inspired, or I'm motivated when, or I work well with, fill in some of those blanks. Again, we don't spend a lot of time working on that piece. It's a self-discovery, a self-assessment exercise. And we're all busy. Who has time for that? It's like exercise. Who has time for that? You got to make the time.
I've always set up a kudos folder at work in my email where I just sort of I literally call it kudos. And anytime I get an email from somebody that's not beyond the just thank you, but literally highlights how I helped or, move the dial a little bit, put it in the folder, put it in the folder, put it in the folder. It's not only a really good tool for your self, I'm actually pretty good at this thing, but also in selling yourself, going, I'm basically creating my own validator quotes for myself to sell myself. So that's been a really good toolkit for me.
Yeah.
I want to dive into what you've talked about, which is talk to other people. Rules of relationships. Hey, the bloody podcast is called Relationships at Work, so I couldn't not talk about relationships, especially around career transition. How important is a network? How important is not being a dick at work so you can make friends? How important is this?
It's really important because, I remember many years ago, my brother-in-law was changing jobs and he said, it's your network that saves you. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting, especially given my line of work. But I've seen it time and time again. Anyone who's ever been laid off, who's experienced that, who's stressed, it really is the quality of your network to introduce you to other people. And that's not to say you can't develop that as you're in job search. But yeah, those relationships are so important. I think, again, if I go back to that example that we shared right off the top, my mentor, Wayne, pulled me into a couple of really great contracts when I first started my own business. Every once in a while I get emails from some of the other folks, and it's just really encouraging and really inspiring. And it's a reminder of, like your love me file or your kudos file. I call it my love me file. And so I think it's really important to grow and develop that network and not just think, oh, well, I have good people, so I'm good. I think you should always be trying to meet new people. And that's one of the great things about LinkedIn is that you can do that. And you can cherry pick who you want to maybe develop a relationship with based on some of the things that they're sharing online. One of the things I'll encourage people to do too is as you're learning more about different people, ask them at the end, once you've summarized and you've had a good conversation with them, is there anyone else who's doing this really cool work that we're talking about that you would suggest that I speak with? And so then you're both developing your network, right? And so, as a general rule of thumb, try and do that wherever you are.
And you never know who will help you.
You never know, yes.
I've been drinking when I was 18 with a friend of mine 30 years ago that is now turned into a chief technical officer of an amazingly huge organization. I just know them because we got tipsy one time, like over years ago, but we've kept in touch as friends. And you don't know who they know. By being the friends with them, they could have friends of helping you out. So it's a long game as much as it's the short game. I love sort of as much while you're doing that research, but also look at your history, your childhood. You'd be amazed if you keep and sustain those those connections, which social's really good for.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed at who's connected to who as you progress.
And I'll add to that, LinkedIn released a study yesterday, and there was one already done. I think they did it in the 90s about the importance of weak ties. So not your first level of connections, but your second level of connections and how statistically they will introduce you to your next opportunity. So it's always great to have people who are like, I always describe them as, I got a guy for that. Like, oh, Maureen, you need your transmission done? I got a guy for that. Like I have people in my network, in my, small town community upbringing who they got a person, I should say person. They got a person for that who could take care of that for me. And so those connectors, having a couple of those in your network, they can really introduce you to a lot of different people.
Now, we've basically just talked about the kind of, connections that we want and nurture. And that's where culture comes in, a lot of this. And when you're looking for that, even within your own organization, or you're looking to move to another, how do you know you're landing? What is the research that people should be looking for to understand if a culture fit works when you're looking at other organizations and so forth?
I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but you have to know what your values are. So if your values are truth, honesty, and integrity, work-life balance, and you start doing your research about this organization and they talk about how, we're focused on this adrenaline, like we're going 24/7, la, la, la. You're like, okay, that's cool. That might not be for me. And so again, when you know with clarity what's most important to you, then as you're doing your research, you can figure some of those things out. Will you have 100% accuracy? No. If a company wants to do a snow job and they want to bring you in, they're going to, that's going to happen. But this is where your network and information interviews come in real handy, is if you know so-and-so knows so-and-so inside the company, then you ask for a meeting and you go, look, I just want to pick your brain. I'm thinking about this organization. Tell me a little bit about, and then talk about what's important to you. What's the leadership like? What kind of autonomy do you have? What do you like most about it? How do they demonstrate things that are important? Like, how do they live their values or their mission statement or their vision? So these are just some of the ways that you can do it, but there's all kinds of different ways that you can talk to different people and learn more about the organization.
Thank God you said that, because I'm always worried that you look at values on a website and you're like, well, that's some nice propaganda. So what does it actually mean on the inside of that organization? Because
Yeah.
if anything on this podcast, it's always the story of values on a poster versus values that are actually being demonstrated. So as an employee looking for a new place to land in your journey, it's hard
It
to
is
know
hard.
a lie or not.
Yeah. I mean, you can do your very best and still get it wrong. But I think it's important to be grounded and sure of what's most important to you, so that if you do get it wrong, you give them the benefit of the doubt, you try and make it work, and then you go, yeah, no, this is not for me. Like, I have talked to people who, a couple of months into a job, they're like, this is not the right fit. 7 years later, they're still there. And I think, I'm glad you made it work. I understand how that comes about, but how did you do that? Like, that must be hard for you.
Mental health, I don't think gets talked about enough when it comes to career transitions. Is staying in an organization that is poisonous for you, whether it's a new one or an old one, can impact a lot more than just your quote unquote 9 to 5, old world speaking. So yeah, I don't think mental health gets talked about nearly enough. Is it being talked about more?
I think since the beginning of the pandemic, I think I've seen it a lot more, and we're certainly paying attention to it as career professionals. We've developed some new training around it. Now, we are not counselors, unless those of us who are counselors, clearly, but we do understand that this is, like I always say, you'll spend more hours at work than with the people that your family, your loved ones, the people you choose. I mean, you choose your work too, but it's so important to get this right. And so I encourage people. I have a couple of clients right now who are in a toxic work environment, and I tell them, you need to figure out what your breaking point is. You need to say, this is it. This is what I am capable of doing. And once it gets to this point, then even though I've been raised never to quit a job till I have a job, or there's something going on in your head that says, I can't do this. How could I possibly do it? Then you have to step away for your own mental wellness. Because the other part of that, Russell, is that people in that weakened state where they're feeling really insecure and imposter syndrome and what have you, it's really hard to get the energy and enthusiasm you need to conduct a job search, because you're already exhausted, you're already burnt out, and so you're not giving your very best first impression. So back to the mental health question, I think we should be talking about it all the time, a lot more than we are, and I encourage people to seek out the resources that they need if they're experiencing burnout, toxic workplace, or need any assistance in terms of mental wellness.
I want to talk myths, and any myths that's pissing you off, Maureen, because even the one that popped into my head of how maybe possibly career transitions have changed so much in the last few years, i.e., oh, I have a gap in my resume, or I have a new job every couple of years. Oh, you hop around too much. You aren't committing to anything. Yeah. This was how I was raised in working in a career or transitions. What's changed? What are some myths we should just put to rest now?
Oh my gosh, where do I start? There's so many. Like, I guess what I'll say is it's all baloney. Actually, I'm gonna clarify that. It's all bullshit. It can't all be, but like some of the requirements for jobs, it's like you need to have 27 different things and be left-handed and wear a red jacket and all of these things, and like that is such no. I had a really good friend apply to a government, it was a Crown corporation. And one of the requirements was she needed to have a college or university degree, and she didn't. And they met her and they loved her and they hired her on the spot. If you have what they're looking for, they will work around the requirements. Does that happen all the time? No. And I'm sure there's some HR people pulling their hair out like, oh my gosh, no, please don't say this. That's not true. It's true in some organizations. It's not true in all organizations. And so, I mean, we could talk about ATS myths and job search myths and compensation. Like, where do you want to start? There's just There's so much out there in terms of limiting beliefs that we got from our upbringing, that we got from our guidance counselor, that we got from school, that we got from society. Here's where I'm at. You can do whatever you want, short of needing like a medical certification or an accounting certification. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. And I'm going to share a story with you. I went to high school with this guy who he was a smaller. I don't want to say he was short. He wasn't short, but for a basketball player, and he was a basketball player, he was not tall. And but he just stuck with it. And I never really gave him any thought until the Toronto Raptors were playing for the championship. And guess who's sitting on the bench of the Toronto Raptors on their championship night? And so this guy's got the ring and all that, but he stuck with it. And so I would always encourage people, it might not be the way you think it's going to be, but if you get your, the thing that you really want to do, the problem that you want to solve, if you get that right, it can take you to some pretty amazing places.
What would you say, who someone's been in it for a while, to those with imposter syndrome that are probably getting in their own way of applying for other jobs? Because, I mean, to say apply to anything, sure. But there's also those with unearned confidence, I think is the term.
Yeah.
That are just applying to everything and going, I can work in any job. But there's a lot of people that don't. They're introverted. They're neurodiverse. They are just imposter syndrome they suffer from.
Yep.
And they sit in those jobs that they shouldn't be in for far too long because anything outside of that comfort zone is frightening. What would you say to those people?
What would it feel like if? I would say, what would it feel like if? And I would, and I know that's really sort of flip and it's not really fair. Oprah has had imposter syndrome. Famous actors and actresses have had imposter syndrome. You can have imposter syndrome and still do hard things. You can take the fear with you. Elise Myers said it on TikTok. Do it scared. Yes, this is uncomfortable. And if you need support, then reach out to a career professional, a friend, a mentor, but do it. Don't be the reason that you didn't apply for the dream job or the best case scenario. That's one of my questions I ask people all the time. What's the best case scenario for you? If you could do best case scenario right now, what is the best case? What does that look like? And maybe I'm too optimistic, or I think I've oversimplified it, but I've seen it time and time again. People get these amazing jobs and they're like, I can't believe how this all unfolded. But it's tiny little steps. It's not, I'm over here and I see this thing way over here and I'm just going to leap. No, there's stepping stones along the way, obviously, but do it scared. Yeah, go for it.
Any resources you'd recommend to people? Because I know I really like that you're saying start with yourself, because people are immediately jumping on Indeed or Glassdoor and going,
stop.
What?
No, really, you're just hurting yourself. You're hurting your self-esteem. You're hurting your self-confidence. It's adding to your imposter syndrome. Here's what a friend of mine, JP Michelle, said. Go to the job search boards as a researcher. You're not looking for work. You're looking to see what's out there that might be of interest to me. And then you're collecting those data points to see if there's a pattern of jobs that are available that are of interest to me. But don't go trying to figure out, will they like me? Will they like me? Do I have enough to be able to do their thing? Start with you first. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
No, not at all. So as someone who has clients who have sort of pivoted, moved into those new roles, give me some warm and fuzzies, Maureen. Where are the light bulb moments that you've seen where it's sort of, oh, it is better, or if I just water here, it's better, the grass is greener, or if I go somewhere else? Where have you seen such a transformation that has been so beneficial to do this? Because there are a lot of people listening to this going, I don't know. Career transitions, I'm miserable, but I'm still, I've got security.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, this comes down to what's most important to you. If security is most important, then don't listen to anything I have to say. You're fine. You're absolutely fine. Here's where I see the light bulb go off. I do executive resume writing for people, and I basically take all of their amazingness, I take their kudos list, and I put it into a document, and I present it in a way that targets their potential employer. And I send it back to them and they're like, oh my gosh, like I would hire me. I love that feeling, by the way. That's amazing. I'm like, and again, I'm a little bit like, what's the Glinda from The Wizard of Oz? I'm like, oh, you had this all along. Like, I couldn't have done it for you if you didn't give me the information, but you had to go on this journey in order for you to be able to see you are amazing. Like, you have incredible talents and abilities. So I think that number one is that shift of being able to see themselves, like they just think, oh, I can do this job description, and they just list those things. But when you talk about their job description and you tie it to a result, like when you talk to people, they love you, like those types of things. When you put it all together, they're like, amazing. So that's number one. And number two is people who are leaving organizations where they don't feel valued. And much like my own, best employee experience, they move into an organization that values the things that are important to them. So we're all working together to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And they're in an organization like that. That's where people, they light up. Like their whole, everything, it feels right. I don't know how else to describe it except they explain to me that it feels right.
I say employee journey all the time, but I don't think people understand that it's their own journey we're talking about. It's not something over there that somebody else is dealing with. It's your employee journey. And do you want to be the hero of the story or the villain that keeps you in the job you're not enjoying?
Yeah.
I have one more question to ask because truthfully, you've used a Glenda the Good Witch reference and an Elise Myers TikTok reference for two Gen Xers that still got that. So nicely played. Nicely done. We're hitting generations here.
Yeah.
Maureen, what's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
Ooh, great question. Oh, the most obvious, I'm going to tell you the most obvious. The thing that comes to mind first is purposeful kindness. Like just be decent. Recognize, Bonnie Henry said this, we're all doing our best. Recognize that everyone is doing the best that they can for where they're at right now. And so you might not love everybody at work, but if you can just show compassion and empathy for the people that you work with, I think that's incredibly powerful.
And it'll certainly help that network when you're trying to do your career transitions later on.
Yeah, for sure.
That's Maureen McCann. She is executive career strategist and owner of Promotion Career Solutions, and she's been a damn delight. Thank you very much, Maureen, for being here and helping us learn a little bit more about career transitions.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.